Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm pleased to welcome you on behalf of Hermes in our 2020 Hermes AGM and Leaders Forum. Unfortunately, due to these current circumstances, instead to have this meeting held here in Akali, the meeting is held virtually, but on time. It was scheduled to be on the 30th of April and will be held on 30th of April. Air transfer, for the first time in its history, is at almost complete halt. The industry faces an unprecedented situation and unforeseeable challenges. As Hermes represent the decision makers of our industry, we have taken the initiative to host this year's Leaders Forum on the theme Air Transport Reimagined and Reinvented. We have to restart this business once there will be a relaxation of the measures implemented by the different states. The air transport 2.0 has to be more resilient, less vulnerable, and better prepared for the next crisis. The forum will be able to provide with some initial views on the next day. At this point, I would like to thank IATA, the supporting organization for this event, and also Athens International Airport for sponsoring the event. As you can see from our program, we have distinguished panelists that are going to participate. And in order to make things simpler, as we are not in face-to-face, I will introduce by saying who is going to speak in the keynote. Then we'll follow with our AGM assembly, and finally with a panel discussion. I don't want to spend more time, and I will start with Jeff Poole, who is the president of Hermes Air Transport Organization. Once again, please turn your mics closed in order to facilitate the process. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Kostas, and welcome everybody to this somewhat unique Hermes meeting. As Kostas indicated, we do have some formalities of an annual general meeting, but when we were setting this up, we thought it would be useful to get everybody together and talk for no more than an hour and a half. So part of my role today, apart from the presidential duties, is to act as the timekeeper and keep us on schedule, because I know that you are all busy people. I think I think I'm quite pleased with the title of this event, Air Transport Reimagined and Reinvented, because I think we all believe that that's exactly what we're going to have to do, and that nothing will be the same again. Like most of you, my day job has changed into crisis management, but apart from managing a task force of the members of World Travel and Tourism Council, I'm also very pleased to be chairing a task force of 8 industry associations and 4 international organisations that are meeting weekly to align our messages and advocacy on the crisis. I think we can see that we do indeed have consistent messages on the need for liquidity in the businesses, or support for the workers as well as the businesses, removal of taxes and other financial burdens, and of course a more positive facilitation like the vouchers issue that is very current at the moment. But we've also seen, I think, in the industry, consistent messaging on how we're going to need to restart operations and get into the recovery mode. Perhaps nothing too important factors there. Firstly, public sector and private sector cooperation. I'm sure many of our keynote speakers today will touch on that. And I see that at 3 levels, really. Both, firstly, within governments and between governments, within the private sector, and then between the public sector and the private sector. And probably the most important aspect of public sector, private sector cooperation moving forward is going to be on the issue of new global standards and protocols, such that we can restart our businesses in a quick and cost-effective way without a lot of bureaucracy and unnecessary burdens. And we need to avoid the situation that arose after 9/11, where the security authorities put in place measures for security reasons without adequate consultation with others. And it took us years and years to unwind from that situation. I believe that many of you will cover those issues in your keynote addresses and in the panel this afternoon. I think I have a simple message here, in that I believe that Hermes has a unique role in this crisis and the recovery, as much as it has done in normal business. As the leaders of the industry, we focused Hermes on people-related issues and some key issues in the industry. Now we need to turn our attention on what unique role can Hermes play, as it is a unique organization, in assisting with the recovery of this great industry in which we all work. That's not a subject for now, but it's something that the Hermes board will be looking at in the coming weeks in order to determine what the future work program and initiatives of Hermes should be. My final point, therefore, is a request that if many of you may have some really good ideas on what Hermes can and should be doing to help in a unique way, rather than duplicating the great work that's already going on. If you have ideas, please let me know and Kostas know, and we'll be delighted to formulate that with the Hermes board. So thank you very much for listening to me. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the keynote speakers. I'm not going. They're all extremely well known, so I'm just going to ask them each to speak in turn in accordance with the agenda. My request, please, is that you do strictly observe the 5-minute limit, because we do need to push through all of the agenda in an hour and a half. So I'd like to introduce now Salvatore Sciacchitano, the President of the Council of ICAO, who is well known to all of us.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, Kostas. And good morning, afternoon, and good evening, probably, for some of you. Let me say, first of all, how much I miss the physical presence of this event. This event has been very much appreciated for the opportunities to have talks and the discussions, very interesting, but also for the bilateral and the physical conferences that we had. So I had in this period so many virtual meetings or video conferences that have been absolutely fruitful, but in this case, really I miss the presence, the physical presence. But that's it. So thank you very much for giving me the floor. Actually, the title of the event, of this forum, is Reinventing or Rethinking the Aviation. Actually, I would slightly change the title, because in my opinion, we have to rescue the national passport. That's a little more difficult. In fact, I will not recall where we are. We perfectly know the industry has figures, but the situation is going so bad that from our perspective, the risk is to go back by decades. It's not just to restart, that is fundamental, of course, but the risk is to go back by decades with huge consequences for the sector, but also for the world economy. Jeff mentioned the 9/11 crisis. Actually, we are not in an aviation crisis. Aviation crisis, there have been many aviation crises, and there's been a recovery in different ways, including in 9/11. At the end of the story, there's been a recovery during a while with the reactions, very fast reactions. There were, even from ICAO side, there was the extraordinary assembly, there was the conferential the ministerial conference, there were measures that were taken, and the restart happened slowly, but happened with effectiveness. Now the situation is different. Situation is different because with more than half of aviation grounded, with the forecast for this year, we published yesterday a press release with a forecast to lose 1.5 billion passengers during 2020, with the perspective for 2021 to be, of course, to grow, but to grow very, very slowly. The risk of bankruptcies, the risk to go down by 30 or 40 years in the aviation, let's say, mechanism, in terms of nationalization of companies, in terms of increase of fares and so on, is in front of us. So there is a huge and urgent need to proceed. Of course, ICAO is taking its role. ICAO is taking its role. The role of ICAO is to support, according to the Chicago Convention, a safe, secure, and sustainable transport. The problem is that this, to support the development of transport, is in normal times. As we are in exceptional times, the need is to rescue aviation, and to do so, we need to work all together. This cannot be done alone, cannot be done alone by ICAO, cannot be done alone, of course, by the industry, cannot be done alone by member states, must be done together. Now, what ICAO is doing is to work in two different levels. One is more operational, and we have already a task force working since the very beginning of the inception of the outbreak, with support, providing support to member states, and with cooperational initiatives with the WHO on a tactical basis, on operational basis. But we need something more strategic. It's for this reason that the Council of ICAO has established a high-level task force. Several of the participants today are part of this task force. Of course, it's a task force of a council with the industry and with the participation of WHO, that is essential from this perspective, and of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, with other international organizations. But the chair of this group, of this task force, is of the chair of the Transport Committee of the Council of ICAO, Philippe Berthoud, and we had yesterday already the first meeting. What is the objective? The objective is to produce a recovery plan. And this recovery plan that will have to have effect in the short, medium, and long term. For this reason, we have tasked the task force to bring to the Council already the first report by end May, so during the month, the coming month. I want to just mention, and then I will conclude, the principles that will have to guide the recovery plan. First of all, the principles are of cooperation altogether. As I mentioned before, nothing can be done alone, as has been said by Jeff, by the way, on security with initiatives that were not well coordinated. The second one is communication. Communication means in two directions. One is to share information, because there are many initiatives that are undertaken at regional level, Europe, Asia Pacific, United States. So sharing of experience and information, but also to communicate at the political level, because there is a need of a stronger commitment at the political level. Then pragmatism. We need to find solutions that would be effective without bureaucracy, without too many formalities. Then again, the plan that will have to be based on data and experts, should be data-driven, not politically driven. We need to have evidence in order to support the decisions that will have to be risk managed, or the risk management base. I mean, every activity in aviation is based on risk management. We know safety is characterized by mitigation of risk. The same is now when we are talking about health risk. So should be based on risk management. And of course, any initiative will have to be taken on the basis of mutual recognition. In this sense, the umbrella of ICAO will have to provide this opportunity. The first task that this group is going to establish, is going to achieve, is to identify what could be the minimum sanitary measures that should be undertaken in order to facilitate, or in order to recognize, let's say, health clean passenger. Not easy. This will have to be done with the health authorities, but this is really the real priority, to identify what are the sanitary measures that could facilitate the restart of international aviation. If these measures or the information, health information, could be useful to the system, ICAO can consider to use and to put them in the context of the travel identification documents. But of course, we need to know, first of all, if this is part, if it's something that is helpful. Of course, we have also elaborated with CAPSCA, that is the collaborative arrangement for prevention and management of public health events in civil aviation, organized by ICAO with other international organizations, a concept of the public health corridors. This is something that is helping to restart the activities. So these are some elements that I wanted to share with you. So rather than a keynote speech, is just a sharing of information. That, by the way, is the characteristic of the Hermes Forum, that is to share experience, to share and profitably to provide proposals. Amongst the proposals, there are two that we are considering, and I personally think that are...
Salvatore, could I ask you to conclude,
sure.
please?
Yes, that is to organize an extraordinary assembly or a ministerial conference. This will be done once that we will have a clear indication if this is helpful for the restart of the air transport. Finally, let me conclude to remind that last year Hermes has been acknowledged as an observer to the ICAO assembly, and is a great achievement for this organization. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salvatore. That's a very thoughtful and great introduction for the other speakers to follow up. So we'll move straight on now to Alexandre de Juniac, the Director General and CEO of IATA. Alexandre, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. Hello, Salvatore. I would like just to make 2 points. First of all, just to make a very quick assessment of what we have done and what has to be done in the very short term to restart this industry. And secondly, I would like to give you some element of perspective on the mid-term and long term for our business. First of all, on the very short term, what we have, all of us, successfully done is, first, we have convinced, I think, almost everybody, public opinion, governments, medias, that aviation was the first and the most severely hit sector. That is clearly shared by everybody. Secondly, that aviation needs massive support from governments, and we have convinced almost everybody. We have plans everywhere. They have been announced. Now we are strongly lobbying in the favor of the implementation, because big numbers have been announced, but the money has to flow in our P&L, in our balance sheet. Otherwise, we'll run out of cash and we'll go bankrupt for that reason. But frankly, it was successful to convince government, to help us massively. Now, third point, we have to work on the restart on the very short term, following three keywords: a strong, an absolute need for collaboration with the international organization or within the international organization, particularly ICAO, with Salvatore. Collaboration within the industry with all our partners, so the airlines, the airport, the NSPs, the aircraft manufacturers, and of course collaboration with government and between government, because it's very simple. It is, let's say, possible to close unilaterally your borders. It's a bit difficult to open it unilaterally if you want to restore connections, connectivity, and travel. So the collaboration is of the utmost need. Second keyword: harmonization. We should have a common and harmonized set of measures implemented everywhere for the restart, and especially when I talk about what we call the biosafety measure, which is the health control and sanitary control for passengers, should be harmonized to avoid complexity, obstacles that would be detrimental to air transport, either for airlines, airports, or of course passengers. And the third word is consultation. Everything must be done in consultation with the industry, between government, international organization, and industry. And frankly, it's what ICAO has done under the leadership of Salvatore to create this task force. It goes perfectly in the right direction on that point. So that's what we have to do in the very short term. Some elements. Second point on the perspective on midterm. First of all, how we see the traffic. We see the traffic, recovering by phase. So domestic, regional, continental, intercontinental. Probably during the end of second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. But at the end of fourth quarter, we should be at a level of 50 to 60% of the 2019 level. So still pretty low. Perhaps we are in the most pessimistic phase of our forecast because we are probably not too far from the bottom of the crisis, but it is not a very optimistic way to see to forecast that by the end of 2020 it would be between 50 to 60% of 2019 traffic. So it means that the global and complete recovery will last until 2021, the end of 2021 probably. That's the piling up of travel restriction plus the enormous impact of the economic recession. On midterm, if we look a few months ahead, or even one or 2 years ahead, we will have probably a shrinking air transport. The sector will have reduced because we'll see bankruptcies and some disappearance of airlines. We will have probably bigger companies due to consolidation, the big ones buying the small ones. We will have probably more government-owned or partly owned companies due to the financial support and capital injection done by government. And one question is where the low-cost sector will be. It's not totally obvious because they are under threat due to various factors. Social distancing on board, green constraints imposed on our business that there would be that for them would be difficult to meet. So it's a question mark. But I'm not worried about the low cost because if we look at on the long term, we will see a recovery. In our survey, there is still a strong appetite by everyone to travel, even if they want to wait for some weeks before taking a flight due to the COVID. The appetite for flying is still there. The impact of fares will remain important. So the low cost will, if they have disappeared, come back or re-expand, probably. We will see also an aviation that will be probably more greener, because it's still a strong request coming from public opinion, from governments, from NGOs. So it will be there. But the point that we will not see, I think, it's a major change in the business model because this crisis is not does not reveal a failure in the business model. There's a business model that has failed. It's simply because we have been forbidden to fly for complete external reason, which is the COVID. So just my conclusion is to say that even if we will go through difficult times, I think we can be optimistic for the coming, let's say, 15 to 20 months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandre, for that excellent insight and ending on a note of optimism. I think it's always worthwhile. We now move from airlines to airports, and I'm delighted to ask Angela Gittens, the Director General of ACI and a board member of Hermes, to give her intervention, please.
Thank you, Jeff. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'd like to first thank Kostas and say I'm very pleased that we're still able to gather for this event, albeit virtually, which brings key stakeholders together each year to discuss some of our most pressing issues. We need such opportunities more than ever as we weather and recover from the global crisis. As Kostas could tell us, the word crisis comes from the Greek to separate, to sift, which means to pass judgment, to keep only what is worthwhile. There is an opportunity in every crisis, even as we grapple with the unprecedented impact of COVID-19, and I hope we can bear this in mind as we reimagine what air transportation can be. However, before recovering from the crisis, we will still need to survive it. From an economic standpoint, the airport sector is among the most severely affected industries. Based on the estimate we made at the beginning of this month, we had forecasted that airports globally will lose 3.6 billion in passenger traffic. And remember, we count the passenger twice at each airport, so our numbers are consistent with those that ICAO has mentioned. And we'll lose $76 billion US by the end of the year, a decline of 45% in this year alone. Now, that's an estimate made at the beginning of this month. We're working on a new estimate. Things have not improved, or prospects have not really improved since the beginning of the month. And we know a drastic decline of such magnitude represents an existential threat for the industry as a whole. The aviation industry is an ecosystem, and we all need each other. Airports are especially challenged as they must continue to meet their capital expense obligations, as they remain characterized by predominantly high fixed costs necessary for maintaining and operating the infrastructure components of the airport. In response, ACI has been advocating for exceptional measures to provide policymakers with a comprehensive toolkit of solutions to ensure that the airport industry can be sustained through the crisis, and which would lay the foundation for recovery. Briefly, these include the protection of airport charges and revenues, tax relief, concession fee waiver, the temporary suspension of slot usage, the continuity of air cargo operations, and comprehensive financial relief. These measures will ensure that financial assistance does not benefit one part of the industry over another, and more on each of these can be found in our recently released policy brief available on the ACI World website. So as we begin to think about a post-COVID air transportation system, we have the opportunity to build a more resilient and sustainable industry. And what might that look like? For one, we have the opportunity to build our business continuity and emergency preparedness and contingency plans so that we are better prepared to meet future crises, not least those that are health related. For instance, we will need a full armor if we are to combat our other global crisis, climate change, which should be an essential element of our recovery plan. ACI will continue to work with ATAG to identify priorities and joint opportunities for the industry. We are pleased that they have not lost sight of the climate change crisis, and nor have airports. We also have the opportunity to reconsider our normal business and operational processes, including how to deploy innovative technologies and solutions for self and autonomous operations. ACI will continue its collaboration with IATA on the next project, the New Experience Travel Technologies, which will play a pivotal role in such ventures. This may also be the time to consider solutions for truly autonomous, touchless passenger self-processing throughout the journey. The crisis will most likely impact passenger expectations and satisfaction. Understanding what our passengers want will be crucial to rebuilding consumer confidence. And in conclusion, we have the opportunity to keep an eye on the wider trends that COVID-19 will have on the world, and particularly on the labor market. How will the pandemic affect the higher education system, as well as the types of skills that will be needed in a very different world? The onus is on us as aviation leaders to forecast how such changes will interact with those in our industry as we evolve and fight to get our fair share of talent. These selected highlights are just the tip of the iceberg as we shift forward. One constant, however, will be our responsibility to safeguard the benefits of aviation to communities and nations worldwide, a topic that needs no elaboration to this crowd. And I thank you.
Excellent. Many thanks, Angela, for that contribution. We now move on to the world of ATM, and Simon Hocquard, Director General of CANSO, please. or not. Do we know if Simon's on the call, Kostas?
Yes, I saw entering.
Hello?
Simon?
Obviously.
Right.
Simon, can you hear us? Are you on the call?
Hi, Jeff. Simon is connecting again. I will allow him to get in again because he was not able to talk. Just a second.
Shall we, Jeff, shall we ask Henrik to speak? And
Yeah, I'm just going to do that. So, Henrik, we bring you forward if you're ready, please, for your 5 minutes to address us. And Henrik Hololei is DG Move in the European Commission and also a member of the Hermes board. Henrik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and also my best greetings to all of you, and special thanks, of course, to Kostas. I echo the words which were already said by the speakers before me, that we all would have much more liked to be in the beautiful city of Hocquard and enjoying the Kostas hospitality and great food and drink, but here we are. But the good thing is also that we are all well and safe and healthy, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. And I hope that it will continue like that. And I wish that all and everyone, of course, to continue to be healthy and in good spirits. However, that's not the case necessarily concerning the aviation industry, because what has been said, I think, is also very good conclusion of where we are. This is an unprecedented crisis, and nobody knows when is it going to end. Nobody knows how long is it going to be. And also, I think that nobody knows exactly how the air transport is going to be reimagined and reinvented. But I'm an optimistic person by nature. I also don't believe all those who are liking to preach about the doomsday and are also trying to paint as gloomy pictures as possible, and the fact that aviation is not going to get back. It is a very, very resilient industry, as you well know, and it has always gone through even the worst of the crisis and is able to bounce back. What is behind it is also the people's yearn and desire to travel, to be connected, and to move around the world, to move around the continent, to move around the country. And that is, of course, one of the key challenges which is here, which is to bring people back and to make sure that people, travelers, traveling public, is ensured about the fact that flying is safe, continuously, not only from the technological point of view, but also from the health point of view, and that there is, again, the trust and confidence in the system. Aviation system, which has built such a strong safety network, has shown something which no other industry has. And this highest level of safety that has been achieved should also be perhaps a good beacon to try to achieve the same when we are talking about the health challenge, as well as trying to make people understand that the aviation sector is taking this extremely seriously. Now, the other point, of course, is that the sector has to work together. There can be no winners and losers when we talk about the aviation value chain more generally. It's nobody's interest to play one part of the value chain against the other. If one wins and the other loses, then the whole value chain loses. And of course, in these crises, and also when you are trying to clutch the straw and trying to get the supports, it is very easy to come. But I think that this is also something that one has to be extremely attentive about. The sector has to also present itself as one voice. Again, it has never been really able to do so. But if it cannot do it now, it will be almost impossible to see that it can do it in the future. And it is also going to lose out if it's not the case. That's why it is so important that we don't forget anyone. It is as important to have there the airlines, the manufacturers, the airports, as it is also to have the ground handlers, the travel retailers, and the lessors, because they all are part of the big value chain. And for that, it is absolutely essential. If we expect that the travel and also the flying is getting back to where it was, and I have no doubt it will, it is necessary to preserve the infrastructure and the overall ecosystem. And again, this is in everybody's interest, because we need to have the framework in place when the opening up is going to start. For the time being, of course, and as a first focus, there has been very much the issue in getting the support, getting the access to financing, getting the access to the employment schemes. At least that's the case in Europe, but also I'm trying to follow it across the globe. It is pretty much the same thing. And this is important to also as seeing part of maintaining the infrastructure and also maintaining the high quality and high level jobs in the sector more generally. But it is also about much more than that. What we need is that the competitive environment that has made aviation affordable and has made aviation what it is today, and a very competitive industry, that this competitive element and the overall competition nationally, regionally, and globally is also maintained. Of course, this is being now altered by the different state aid schemes, where those countries who have much more policy space and financial possibilities are in a better position to support these airlines or elements of the aviation value network than those countries who are not there. And of course, this is also to be kept in mind. An airline which is getting a strong state support and then buying up other airlines with that, of course, is the worst that can happen from the point of view of the competition. And that's why we also need very much the low-cost sector, because the low-cost sector is the one who has been the main driving force of the growth over the last decade, and also the one who is actually bringing in a strong competitive element. And of course, we need continuously affordability and of course the connectivity. And of course, consolidation will happen. There will be, unfortunately, exits, and this is the downside of this crisis. But also at the same time, as it was said earlier, when we have a more resilient aviation sector as a result, then I'm afraid that that is the price to pay. Last point I'm going to make is, of course, that now one thing that we do where we can get it right or get it wrong is to initiate the so-called exit strategy and recovery. But first and foremost, the exit strategy. What does it mean that transport, when does it mean that aviation and travel is reopening again? And of course, part of it is about restoring the trust and confidence, what I said earlier, but it's also important to agree on the principles, principles which are not overly prescriptive from the point of view of regulators, and also leaving a certain policy space for the industry and for the industry to itself lay down certain parameters. And there, the problem is that we can easily lose the possibility to restart if we put something on the paper which looks great, but which is not sufficiently balanced, which has far too much complexities and far too many layers. And of course, social distancing in the airplanes, for God's sake, this is simply not going to happen. Or if we are going to insist that, we will come with an outcome which means that the planes are simply not going to take off. These are difficult things because there we are not alone. It's about the health authorities. It's also about the internal security authorities and the border authorities who are laying down the issues in relation to entry and exit of the countries. But this is essential. Mutual recognition, regionally, globally. That is also what ICAO is doing, and I want to commend that. This is also what IATA is doing. This is also what the ACI is doing. And I also very much see that this, what is happening on a global scale, this is what is happening through these organizations is essential. We as regulators also, we need to trust them, and we also need to leave them to work out the exact details. But at the same time, it's our job to lay down the right framework for this. And we are in a system which is dynamic, not static, so we should also be able to observe the situation and act accordingly. Lastly, just to say, as Alexander, I'm also optimist. I'm optimistic about this sector. I'm optimistic about this sector's ability to rebound. But this depends very much on cooperation. This depends also on the right policy choices which are made by the regulators. And of course, lastly and most importantly, it very much depends on the trust and confidence of the travelers. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik, for your usual strong, forthright, but well-measured views. Earlier on this call, we tragically lost the voice of ATM. I hope we're able to regain that now, because I'd like to invite Simon Hocquard, Director General of CANSO, to speak to us for his 5 minutes, please.
Jeff, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly, Simon.
Oh, very good. I even try and share the video. That may or may not work as well. So thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Kostas. Jeff, just referring to your comments right at the very beginning before we started about timing, I think your timing was impeccable from a certain point of view. Very good. So, thank you for inviting me to speak today.
You have opened your mic. Please close your mic and camera.
There we go. So I think, everybody's covered. The ATM industry is suffering equally as all parts of the aviation's life cycle, along with the requirement to keep operating no matter how many aircraft are flying. It doesn't matter whether they're 770 or 700. I'm going to take a slightly different approach and compare what our concerns were perhaps 2 months ago and how quickly they've changed, and now what they are, and now what we think about, and how we adapt to this new aviation landscape. Now, let's start by saying that I hope, first and foremost, I hope you're all well and your colleagues are all staying safe. Wellness, both from a health and financial perspective, is a key concern in these truly exceptional times. And unsurprisingly, it's of utmost concern to all of us that work in aviation too. Once thriving industry has been brought to its knees in a way that I'm sure none of us could have imagined, even a few months ago. And the challenges we foresaw at the turn of this new decade are very different from the ones immediately in front of us today. And that is particularly true for ATM. When I look back to where we were before the start of this pandemic, the biggest challenges facing our industry were probably capacity, fragmentation, new airspace entrants, and sustainability. And sustainability is the only one that I've heard in the comments so far. So back in January, there was a global shortage of air traffic controllers, a lack of flexibility in the system, the net result of which were hotspots of delay and capacity crunches all across the globe. And with air traffic levels predicted to double by 2036 at that time, a big concern for us was, how do we make sure we had enough controllers to deal with the ever-growing numbers of aircraft in our skies? Now, right now, I'm sure many of us would trade worrying about how we deal with too much traffic with the scenario we are now faced with. That of a prolonged and unprecedented decrease in air traffic numbers. And as with so many organisations in the aviation supply chain, our most pressing challenge is how we survive this crisis and the drastic drop in revenue it has triggered. As CANSO, we continue to stress the important role of this critical national infrastructure plays both today and the contribution it can make to the global economic recovery in the future. Another key element of our role will be working across and with, and that's the important bit, with the entire aviation community and readying our industry for the restart. We need to make sure we come out of this crisis with the right-sized organisations and smart processes that will enable us to safely and efficiently deal with the increased traffic levels, whatever they may be. So the other big challenge on our radar at the start of this year was fragmentation. As you know, the ATM infrastructure is comprised of communication networks, surveillance capabilities, network of radar, satellites to make sure we can all see all the aircraft, all of which are being managed nationally, with each individual country controlling its own airspace. As you can imagine, this is highly inefficient way of working, and in the past there was real reticence to tackle this. But if we're in this period of depressed traffic much longer, will we see a change in perspectives and more of a willingness to work across borders? Technology will be key to any move in that direction, and CANSO will work with all our members, the NSPs and the vital supply chain that supports it to shape that future ATM landscape. So another challenge was about how to integrate new airspace entrants such as drones, space vehicles, weather balloons into our already crowded skies, and we don't hear them mentioned as much at the moment. How can we support them getting airborne and keep them safely separated from the other more established airspace users? The question of how to integrate use space with our heritage airspace was a complex problem, and perhaps we should seize this unexpected downturn in traffic to accelerate our thinking on this issue. Which brings me to the final challenge within our sights before the pandemic, sustainability. Pressure on our industry to reduce the impact of aviation on the environment was enormous. The movement gained increased momentum when we know Greta Thunberg chose to travel back from Europe by catamaran and fly. Fast forward to today, where contrails and airport noise have been practically eradicated. I can only imagine that the pressure our industry faces will be heightened when we see the traffic pick up and when planes and the downside of air transport is highly visible again. As the sector rebuilds in the midterm, doing so in an environmentally sustainable way will be key to social license. If we are in this for the long haul, could we use the time to accelerate some changes that will reduce the impact of aviation on the environment? As an example, in Europe, CANSO recently led an initiative to start trialling perfect flights during the downturn. And it's those types of things that I think can add great value. So what else can we do now that will give us a head start when the traffic does return? What strategies and plans can we put in place to deliver real environmental benefit that we can talk about when the heat is on our industry once again to tackle climate change? So to conclude, our challenges are very different and arguably much greater than the ones we envisaged at the start of 2020. But there may be some opportunities here to use the downtime to deliver real beneficial change. This is without doubt the most significant challenge the aviation industry has ever faced, but as we turn our minds to the future and to recovery, now more than ever, it is vital that we stand strong as an industry to build a better future for aviation. Whilst even today some parts of the industry are fighting for themselves, understandably, we must still all work together. We are all part of this as the aviation industry as a whole. It's also more critical than ever for us to stress the important role aviation plays in our society and give the public confidence to fly again. Aviation is a resilient industry capable of delivering significant benefits both socially and economically. It is vital, empowering that societal and financial recovery. And I do look forward to working with the industry partners on successfully navigating this recovery. If any industry can survive, aviation can. And I, for one, am proud actually of all the amazing work that's being done across the entire pitch to safeguard this industry and forge a new normal. So thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Simon, and I'm sure the participants on the call will join me in thanking all of our excellent keynote addressees today. I think we've seen an extremely worthwhile contributions from each of you, delivered in different styles, but ultimately in full support of the aviation industry that we all love and serve. So again, thank you to our keynote addresses. We now move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the formal annual general meeting of Hermes. You will appreciate that we do need legally to hold an annual general meeting. It is our intention to drive through this agenda as quickly as we possibly can with the minimum of formalities, and I will guide you through the processes as we do that. So I would like to ask my colleagues on this section of the agenda to please work with me on that and to keep your interventions as short as possible. The incentive for all of you to stay on the call is that we do have an excellent panel session moderated by Eamon Brennan in about 15 to 20 minutes. So I'd like to hand over now to Kostas Iatrou, the Director General of Hermes, to give the annual report. Kostas, it's yours. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Just to, before I start my annual report, let me tell that we have a quorum. We have 53 Hermes members, then out of 86, then we can proceed with the assembly. Also, as already sent by email, if there is any disagreement on the resolution we have to take, then you have to send an email to agm@hermes.io. Okay, then I'm starting my annual report. And from the last assembly back in May last year here in Cali, we have signed additionally 3 new MOUs with AFRA in June, with Eurocontrol in September, and with IATA also in the same month. And in total, we have 7 MOUs. And as Jeff said, these partnerships will appear in our panel, as those participating in the panel are the partners of Hermes. As Salvatore mentioned earlier, ICAO gave us the possibility and accepted our request to participate as an observer in our in ICAO last assembly. And I would like to thank ICAO and the ICAO Council for this opportunity. Hermes participated with 2 information papers based on Hermes recommendation. And the Hermes was represented by Luis Felipe de Oliveira and myself. Hermes last year, after our last assembly, hosted 2 receptions, one in June in IATA AGM. And I would like to thank Alexandre, Poole, Steele, and Brian Pierce to make this happen. And also one in September during ICAO assembly, where we signed also the MOU with Eurocontrol. Regarding our membership, we have 86 regular members, 3 honorary members, and 2 associate members. And I'm pleased to welcome our newest member, that is someone you probably everyone knows, Nicolas Kallio, who is the CEO and president of Airlines for America. And I will ask Nick to say a few words for joining our organization. Nick, can you hear us?
Kostas, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that I am very pleased to be part of this group. I look forward to working with all of you and hopefully seeing you all face to face sometime in the near future. Thank you for having me.
Thank Nicholas. Yes, the idea and for making this conference is to be on site, but due to the circumstances, as we said, we had to do it in this version. And I would like in this moment to thank everyone that you accepted this invitation to participate and to make this event on time and on schedule. I continue my annual report saying that Hermes received in September last year the Branch with History Award from Cali Club, and that is the oldest country club, and our president, Jeff Poole, accepted the award on behalf of Hermes. And I will close my annual report with the most important part that Hermes is doing, our recommendation. Hermes recommendation are, as I said, the heart of our activity, and there's interaction with all the industry players. We have already done 2 recommendations, one on ownership and control in 2018 and education and performance in 2019. Those recommendations were included in the ICAO Assembly documentation. Also, the ownership and control recommendations were presented during the ICAO Air Transport Symposium last May in Seoul. Regarding our this year recommendation on digitalization, NI and aviation, and the human factor, I'm pleased to inform you that we received 13 position papers from ICAO, from IACO, from IFACEA, from ACI, from GATO, from Malta, from the European Commission, from AFRA, from ERA, from IATA, from ASA, from Eurocontrol, Airlines for America, and we had an interview on this same theme with Salvatore Sciacchitano. Professor Martin Dresser, in a few minutes, will present the final report of the report committee. And all of these recommendations and the position paper will be uploaded to our website in a few days. And this, Mr. President, concludes my annual report.
Thank you, Kostas, and thank you for running through a lot of activity very, very concisely. And I hope the members on the call appreciate that. We now move to the next item, which is the election of directors for 2020 to 2021. Based on the Hermes bylaw, the AGM has to elect its directors for the next year. In addition to myself, the directors are Robert Dayon, Kostas, Iatrou, Angela Gittens, Henrik Hololei, and Luis Felipe de Oliveira. Now, in my humble opinion, your organisation has been exceptionally well served by its directors so far. So our proposal is that we re-elect those directors for 2020 to 2021. And in order to speed up this AGM process, we will operate on the basis only of if anybody has comments or objections, or, as Kostas indicated earlier, has submitted an email objection. So may I ask if there are any comments or objections to the reappointment of the directors proposed?
No comment. Everything is okay.
Okay, thank you very much, in which case that item is passed. We now move on to a much more pleasurable part of the agenda, which is the appointment of a new honorary member. You've already heard him speak today, Salvatore, the president of the ICAO Council. It is customary, it is already customary in Hermes that the president of the ICAO Council and the Secretary General become honorary members of Hermes. So we're really delighted to award honorary membership to Salvatore. He is well known to you. He's well known to most of us for perhaps more years than we care to think about. But you will all be aware that he served with great distinction in the Italian civil aviation area, ending as Deputy Director General of the Italian Civil Aviation Authority. He then moved on for 8 years to be the Executive Secretary of the European Civil Aviation Conference, or ECAC. And he's now, of course, our good friend and honoured colleague as President of the ICAO Council. So it is a great shame, Salvatore, that we are unable to be all in a room together to present you with this honorary membership, but we do so virtually and with a promise that as soon as we are able to reassemble as the Hermes community, we will recognise you on a face-to-face basis. This is an honorary membership, but it does come with one very strict condition. And that is that you as the honorary member and me as the president of Hermes get together and share an excellent bottle of very good Italian red wine. I'm sure that is I am sure that you are up to the challenge, but I'd like to invite you to say a few words, Salvatore.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. I'm ready with my glass for the time being. No, I want to just thank the AGM of Hermes. It's a real honor for me. It's a real personal pleasure because I've been, let's say, working very closely with Hermes since the very beginning. The role and the value of this organization is because it's a think tank. There's no specific objectives rather than elaborating without specific interests the topics that are for the interest of international civil aviation. So it's a great honor for me. It's a great pleasure. I missed the opportunity to receive this honorary opportunity in presence, but it will be a pleasure to share the bottle of wine with you and all of you at the first opportunity. Thank you very much again.
Great, thank you, Salvatore, and congratulations from all of us. The next item is more of a working nature, and Kostas referred to this work in his overview and report earlier. We're exceptionally gifted to have an excellent report committee, and I would like to invite the chair of the report committee, Professor Martin Dresner, to give us a brief presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I'm speaking on behalf of the Hermes 2020 Report Committee, consisting of Andreas Papatheodorou, Robert Deon, Clément Flores, and Jose Guedes Diaz, and myself. Our committee was tasked with developing recommendations on digitalization, artificial intelligence in aviation, and the human factor. The report is based on the contents of 13 position papers on this subject received from leading industry and governmental associations. The briefs were submitted prior to the current crisis impacting the aviation industry. In the pre-coronavirus era, with strong growth and robust profits through much of the aviation industry, the concern was how to best use these new technologies to help the industry accommodate a doubling in capacity over the next 30 years. The governmental and industry associations felt that these technologies could help aviation in several ways. AI technology can be used in the maintenance field to predict possible failure of parts. AI can be used to improve the functioning of autonomous vehicles, such as ground handling equipment and drones. AI can be used to better control aircraft movements, to increase efficiency and improve safety. Using the data generated by aircraft and their systems, smart algorithms can be used to detect hazardous behaviors. Digitalization can help develop a better understanding of the businesses, routes, costs, and opportunities for improvement. Digitalization can help the aviation industry better understand traveler needs and to improve the passenger experience. Digital technologies can change the way training is delivered, for example, through the development of virtual reality devices. However, there are considerable hurdles that must be overcome in the implementation of these technologies. These include developing and implementing standard practices, convincing governments to adopt the standards and enact enabling regulations, allowing for the sharing of data but protecting the privacy of individuals, paying for the implementation of the technologies, especially in developing countries, developing and training the workforce needed to implement the technologies. Based on the input from trade and governmental associations, our report committee has the following recommendations to guide the implementation of these technologies. ICAO needs to take the lead in developing a roadmap for the implementation of AI and digital technologies in the industry. The implementation of industry standards can be best accomplished through industry associations. These industry associations should proceed concurrently with ICAO standards development. Concurrent development will help ensure that the standards are workable and will speed their development. Funding sources for technology implementation must be identified to ensure that aviation firms around the world can participate in these new technologies. Finally, training and development of these new technologies should be implemented immediately or in the near future. The current downturn of the industry has idled thousands of industry employees. Now is an ideal time to engage in training and retraining for the future needs of the industry. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jeff.
Hello?
Jeff, you're muted.
Jeff, you have to unmute.
Sorry, technology and I are never the best of friends. I was just saying, on behalf of the board of Hermes, I'd like to thank the report committee for the excellent work they've done. And unless anybody has any immediate comments now, I'd like to assume that this AGM approves the report committee's presentation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And we now move on quickly to the another legal matter, the financial statements, and I'd like to invite Robert Dayon, the Vice President and Treasurer of Hermes, to give you a brief report, please.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I will be very, very short. I think last October, Hermes Airport Organization opened its account in the Royal Bank of Canada. You already received the financial statement of December 31st, 2019, prepared by Poole Associate. And I will simply tell you that the excess of revenue over expenses are 2,125 Canadian dollars. I don't know if you have any questions. That's all I have to say about that. As we are delayed. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, many thanks, Robert. So again, on the same basis, unless we hear of any objections or if Kostas has received any emails objecting, we assume that item to also be passed by the annual general meeting.
So far, no comments, no questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the final formality is the appointment of the auditor, again a requirement under the bylaws. On behalf of the board of Hermes, I propose to the annual general meeting that Poudret et Associés be appointed as the auditor for the 2020 financial statements. As you'll be aware, Hermes is registered in Canada, and Poudret and Associés are based in Montreal and are known to Kostas and others. So again, on the same basis, unless anybody has a comment or objections, we will assume that this annual general meeting approves the appointment of Poudret and Associés as the auditors.
Supported. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And that concludes the formalities of the annual general meeting. And I'm now delighted that we move on to the panel discussion section. We've allocated half an hour. We're running about 7 minutes late. We've allocated about half an hour for this panel discussion. We can allow the panel to have at least its half an hour and to run on by 5 or 10 minutes if that is necessary and is a natural way of concluding the discussion. I am always wondering what will come next when I invite Eamon Brennan to speak or moderate a session, and I'm sure that the fact that we're operating visually will not be a constraint on him today. But I really am pleased to invite Eamon to moderate this panel discussion and to introduce his excellent panel to us. Over to you, Eamon.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Good afternoon to everybody all over the world from a sunny Brussels today. Unfortunately, the pubs are closed, so that's been a certain constraint on our activities. So if I could just mention a few things before we start the panel. I think Europe has been impacted very significantly by the crisis. You know, we've had a 90% reduction in traffic. We're seeing a cash crisis of the airlines. I mean, everybody from ANSPs, airlines and states, and we're all trying to help here in Eurocontrol and with the Commission and everybody. Really, we are seeing a kind of a change in the way the industry has kind of fallen so very fast. And we're looking at significant airline bailouts. And there is a worry in Europe that the change in the way we're doing business, that with state bailouts, that ultimately we run the risk of distorting competition. And as Henrik pointed out, this is something we want to try and avoid, is that state money is used to inflate the cost of airlines and, you know, bail out some, and others, mainly private sector airlines, don't get bailed out. So I think it's very important that we all stick together in the industry, and as has been pointed out repeatedly, that this is not a time to start cannibalizing each other so that the airports attack the airlines and they attack the ATMs. This is a time where we all have to face that we have a big crisis and we need to work. So I'm not going to repeat what's been said by everybody, but I'm going to try and recover the time. So I've got a really excellent panel here today, and I've kept the whole thing as simple as possible. So firstly, I'm going to ask Abdul Wahid Tefaha to take the floor, because I've got a simple question, and I'm going to ask all four of them to give me 3 minutes on the simple question and make a few short points. And it's basically, what needs to happen for the industry to recover from COVID? Specifically, what needs to happen? So, Abdul, if you would give us a few minutes and let's have your thoughts on this. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And there are three things that actually scare me to death in this situation. One of them, of course, but this is not one of the three, is contacting the COVID itself. But beside that, number one thing that scares me is how would the governments behave in the issue of reopening the aviation sector. And let me repeat something I heard from, and at very senior levels. They told me without aviation, actually, this coronavirus wouldn't have become global. It would have been still in China, and it would have been an endemic. I told them, yes, you are absolutely right. But even if we were still hunter-gatherers, we would run the risk of being killed by wild beasts we are hunting. So there is a risk, but of course the rewards and the history is going to move forward. But governments, actually some governments, and I know some people are thinking that, aviation actually spread the contagion, and when we allow aviation to restart again, we need to be, there will not be any risk of a second wave or a third wave, to the extent that we are going to be so draconian that we will basically, not allow aviation to become what it is, connecting people. The second concern, the second scary thought that I have is stemming from the first one. If governments started to act certain measures, require passengers that if the temperature is above 37.3, for instance, which in fact, if you are running to the gate and you are late, your temperature will go up to around 37.6. You will be quarantined and you will be locked down and so on. So people are going to be scared from flying, not only for the risk of contamination. We know contamination on board aircraft is almost zero, the risk of contamination, but I'm going to listen to the government saying that air travel is very risky. We need to be extremely sure that nothing bad will happen. And when they hear about the possibility of being stranded abroad, then they will actually be extremely reluctant to travel again. So that is the second scary thought. The third one is something that usually happens with crises. And I was actually in a conversation with my dear friend Henrik Hololei the other day about what usually governments and societies actually retract into in terms of how and the global nature of it actually should teach us that these geopolitical boundaries that we live, the official ones, actually they are irrelevant in our times. Even the solution for the pandemic is after and not nationally. But unfortunately, resort to regressing into comfort zones, regressing into protectionism, and what we would be dealing with in the future, I'm afraid, is a projection of that protectionism under the guise of health into aviation and all the other sectors of the trade in goods and services. These are the three scary thoughts that I have today. On the long run, I totally agree with all the previous speakers that aviation is not only resilient because aviation is a force of good. Aviation is resilient because history does not go back on its steps. History will have to go forward, and aviation has become part and parcel of our livelihood.
Thank you very much, Abdul. Well done.
So
I mean, I think
it's simple.
Thank you. That's really good. What I think it's important also is that, the negatives and the people who wish to knock aviation, there is no global business economy and there is no global economy without aviation. And I think that's something we shouldn't forget. Maybe I can move on to speaker number 2. And if we look at the 3 minutes again, Abdurrahmane, maybe you would take the floor and maybe you would look at and tell us what you think needs to happen for the industry to recover. Looking forward to hearing from you. Go ahead.
I will focus my intervention in 3 concerns. For me, these are the survival of our industry, recovery, and the new standards coming after the COVID-19. For African airlines, the immediate threat is the lack of liquidity. So because of the restrictions, and as long as this restriction will be in place, African airlines will be in trouble, because we have made an appeal to government to assist their airlines, but we know that this is not only an aviation crisis, it's also an economic crisis, and the capacity, financial capacity. The worry is that maybe aviation will come after health system and economy rescue small and medium enterprises. And also international financial institutions, which will be helping states, need also to think about airline, because aviation is needed in Africa, because it's a big continent, and connectivity has always been a challenge. And we hope that after the COVID-19, we will continue to improve connectivity within the continent. I think also the regulators need to harmonize certain measures to allow the restart of the business. These are some exemptions on cruise and staff licensing, extension of certification when the safety is not at stake, of course, and waiver of slot utilization rules for year 2020 and 2021. At airlines level, I think that African airlines need to put in place cash and cost containment measures in revisiting their engagement. They will have to review budget and business plans. And also, this will be most difficult to reposition their fleet and networks, because I think that nothing will be like before. And also collaboration. African airlines need also to collaborate after COVID-19. The last point for me is about the new norms coming. I hope that the challenge will be, I think the challenge will be to get passengers' confidence back, and the sanitization and distancing measure at all stages of the passengers' pathway will be critical. And I hope that the industry will come up with a standard proposition of standard for all the industry, and to avoid that every country come which is its own measures. I'm saying that because I've seen during the Ebola outbreak in Africa, in West Africa, from one country to another, the standards were completely different about passengers training. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that you raised some really good points there, particularly about standards, the cash shortage, the regulatory alignment needed. And I think from an African point of view, you have some experience dealing with the previous pandemics, particularly like the Ebola outbreak, we can usefully learn from in Europe. But I think the big point you're making there is about getting passengers' confidence back. So if I could turn to Luis Philippe. Luis, maybe you could start looking at it and give us a perspective on what you think needs to happen to bring us all back. Like, what do you think we need to do to recover the industry, and as quickly as possible? Go ahead.
Thank you, Iman. I would like to, let's say, repeat many of the subjects that are already mentioned here. But basically, considering the Latin American region, we are coming from a 16 years of growth, and the 16 years of growth comes with a double of the size in the last 10 years. And that, of course, will be changed completely right now. The same as Africa, we have continental airspace, and some of the countries we cannot move without the airlines. A simple flight, for example, that is 45 minutes, 1 hour from Bogota to Medellin could take 11 hours by bus. To cross the Amazon, probably you cannot do without the flights, you can do only via boats. And that is something that is different the other parts of the world, that you can replace aviation for another ways of transport. Having said that, one important point for the region, I think, is the harmonization of the process when you restart. Basically, when we saw our skies are closing were closing in the region, we saw that each country decided unilaterally to take the decisions and their measures that affect millions of passengers around the region. That's why we still in the region with the repatriation flights that need to be negotiated one by one, and that is because of the lack of harmonization in the process. We're really pleased that ICAO is taking the leadership on that way, that it is working groups, that the task forces will be allowed to change the view of the states, and the states will take a unique approach, we hope, that will help the aviation go back on track. Doesn't matter if one country in our region will take the decision to open the skies if the other ones are not doing the same. That's why basically we need to smoothly work together, of course, respecting the developments of the disease in the region. However, that will be key for the region to recover. And I believe that is the word mentioned as well. That's why basically the world will recover only if you have harmonization in the process. The second point that I believe is very important was how long it takes. Our airlines, especially in Latin America, are very short of cash. And that makes a difference if you need to stay 1 month more without flying, or 6 months or 3 months or 4 months. We are, for example, very upset in certain ways with the decision from Argentina that closed the skies until 1st of September. And that is incredible, because basically if all the countries take unilateral measures like that, of course, we won't be able to come back. That's why harmonization and save the cash to restart is the two important points that I would like to mention.
Thank you very much, Luis Philippe. I think you're echoing the same points that the previous speakers, the issue of cash. Frankly, I'm astounded by what Argentina did. It seems to me to be a complete overreaction, and also it's not coordinated with Brazil or anything else in the region. So to me, it looks a very strange thing, and it's what we really need to avoid in aviation is unilateral actions rather than coordinated actions. So if I can now turn to our last speaker today, Montserrat. So Montserrat has a difficult job because in Europe, everybody is bailing out Lufthansa, Air France, KLM. Nobody wants to help the small regional airlines, which are important for connectivity. So Montserrat, maybe you could explain to us how you see us getting out of this mess that we're in as quickly as you can. Thank you. Go ahead, Montserrat.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Eamon, and thank you, Kostas, also for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. Yes, of course, you mentioned it, and Henrik also raised it. Obviously, we are very worried about the fact that this crisis may create some competitive distortion in the market, and the distortion can come at two levels. Can come between the member states, so the member states can actually do different things in a business that is completely international, like aviation, and also at the member state level as well, as the member states may decide to rescue some of the airlines and not the others. So this creates a huge distortion in the system. But to your question, more in general, not particularly only in Europe, I mean, we all heard these words these days that never let a serious crisis go to waste, right? So I think we have to make a lesson for life and a reminder that we shouldn't take anything for granted. The levels of competition, the levels of connectivity, the levels of consumer choice that we have enjoyed before in Europe, let's not take that for granted, because these crises may blow it up, and this may be the end of it. So I mean, this event that Kostas and the Hermes team have put together is about raising from the ashes together and finding opportunities again, and prove the resilience of our incredible industry. But we can be optimistic. But there's one absolutely element that needs to be restored above anything else to overcome this challenge, and is passenger confidence. And this has been mentioned before also by a few of you, but if there are no passengers, there's simply no aviation industry unless we reduce it to cargo. I think the second element that was also mentioned is working together. Alexandra and Angela and Henrik and others have made reference to this aviation ecosystem. We have to take this opportunity to work further together, to cooperate, to collaborate. More business, different business models working together, more than ever vital for the airlines to survive, whether, this is by merging with other airlines, being more efficient, getting alliances, getting in partnership with other players in the supply chain. Those who cannot survive on their own should be able to use their intelligence to partnership and their imagination with other businesses to ensure that they can keep operating. Also with airports, because we will be subject to a lot of operational constraints. So it has never been more important to work together. And this partnership also should be, I think, in another very important element, which is technology. Technology is going to be key to survival. The airlines will need to take their website, their IT infrastructure, their apps to a new level. And this will need money. It will need financial investments. For example, there will be more apps to monitor the passenger health checks that provide with temperature levels, and all these may actually add layers of complexity to the customer experience, and again be detrimental to the customer confidence in flying. There will be more biometrics, more utilization of digital technology. All this needs money, so we need to ensure the money reaches the airlines, reaches all the airlines equally in competition, similar levels, and this needs to happen to then be able to restore consumer confidence and start operating again.
Hi, Montserrat. Maybe you would answer the question about what's your view about all the bailouts that the large airlines are getting, both in the United States and in Europe, and what do you think the effect of this on the smaller regional airlines? Maybe give me 1 minute on this.
Okay, I think, we're not against bailouts. I think the money is needed in the system and the governments have the money, so it's fair that they save the airlines. I just think that this money needs to become available for everyone in proportion to the business. Obviously, the larger airlines will need more money. The smaller airlines will also need money. This is what it needs to happen to avoid distortions in competition. We're not against, we just think it needs to reach everyone.
Okay, but it appears to me sometimes that the smaller airlines can be dispensable and the larger ones are not. But look, that's a broader issue. If I can just thank the 4 panelists, I'd much prefer if we were doing this in person. We could have better fun. I'd like to thank Kostas. I think that the overriding message from the panel is that we need to stick together, that as a value chain, aviation is critical for the economy, for the world economy. We need to understand that we need common standards to recover, and we need to build on the experience, particularly of areas like Africa, etc., and also to make sure that we don't do unilateral actions. And that's why calls like this and organizations like Hermes are essential to make sure that we collaborate, we work together. So thank you, Kostas, and this partnership is good. And I pass back to Jeff, the chairman. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and of course, Montserrat.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Eamon, and for your excellent panel there. This brings us to the conclusion of this AGM and Leaders Forum. I would like to thank all of the participants for being with us. It's great, as several of you have said, to actually be able to exchange views with each other, even if it is virtually. It's a little bit different from isolation, but we very much appreciate your time. We hope and believe that this was an hour and a half very well spent in terms of the value and time relationship. Thank you for your support on all of the AGM matters and enabling that to go smoothly. But I'd particularly like to thank all of you who have spoken and participated during this forum. And finally, I wish to thank Kostas for his organisation of this meeting and enabling us to get together virtually, together with the support of ALTA and the sponsorship of Athens Airport. So with that, again, many thanks to all of you. please let Kostas and I know if you have great ideas for what Hermes might be doing over the next 12 months or so, and we'll respond to you. In the meantime, everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jeff.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. Well
Thank you,
done.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
C'est bon, hein?
Nicole, you can end the recording, please.